you, I think, have heard of it, right? Have you heard of the social decision-making program? Right? And maybe you even heard of the term social emotional learning. So off the bat, I'm going to tell you, here in New Jersey, we actually are trying to take the center stage, the forefront, and changing it from social emotional learning to social emotional character development. The only reason I tell you that is in the literature that you might read here in New Jersey about it, you might see SECD instead of SEL. So it's social emotional learning. Social emotional character development is the combining of social emotional learning and character education. The truth is they need each other to be successful, so why not put them together? And I could do a whole workshop on why they won't go together, but anyway. So this is just one of my favorite quotes, and it really hopefully speaks to social emotional learning. I've learned that people will forget what you said, and people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel, right? How many of you remember a teacher who made you feel spectacular, who maybe inspired you, right? Does anybody have the opposite, where they remember a teacher who made them want to, and all the other ones kind of just fade into the background, right? So that sense of leaving them with a certain feeling definitely affects what we remember and what we learn. So just for a second, now we're not going to do this exact activity, but think of somebody you enjoy working with. Whether it's a youth, whether it's a coworker, whether it's a supervisor, think of somebody you want to work with, you want on your team. Has everybody kind of got somebody in their head that they're thinking about? Now, what makes them a pleasure to work with? Why do you like to work with them? What is it about them?
They are easygoing.
They're easygoing.
They listen to what I say.
They listen to what I say, sort of like I'm doing now? No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
They're collaborative.
They're collaborative.
Sense of humor.
Sense of humor, especially on a long business meeting, right? Anything else?
They value, what I have to say.
They value what you have to say, absolutely.
Yeah, I was thinking respect.
Respect, there's a certain amount of respect, right? So these are the traits and characteristics. This is what we're talking about when we talk about social emotional learning. We're talking about those social skills, those ability to get along with other people. The first thing we don't think about necessarily when we're talking about wanting somebody on the team is their intelligence. And not that we don't want smart people on our team, we absolutely do, but maybe we want a different kind of smart, right? Think about, does anybody watch Big Bang Theory? Right? I love that show. Do you want Sheldon on your team?
No.
No, right? Because he's not, he doesn't necessarily have the sense of humor. He ain't easygoing, right? So it's that idea that it's about the social skills. It's about the willingness to work well in teams. And when I do these workshops for kids or teenagers or even high school teachers, I'll say, do you know what the number one thing that employers want from their new employees, from their new hires? What do you think it is? I mean, it's helpful to have a degree from Harvard or Yale, but what is it that they're looking for really? Say again?
Commitment.
Commitment. Commitment, the ability to be a self-starter, the ability to work well with others. Like all I ever really needed to know I learned in kindergarten. Those are the skills that we're really talking about. So what is social emotional learning? Social emotional learning is a process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotion, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. So self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. Those are the 5 competencies. Now, just for a second, think about, some of you have been working for a long time, other of you, maybe have just started, but do you see an increase or a decrease in these skills?
Decrease.
There's a decrease, and research will actually back you up on that. There's a significant decrease in many of these skills. Any ideas why? Electronics plays a big role in it, right? And they were decreasing before electronics became so popular, but what is it about electronics?
It's not face-to-face.
It's not face-to-face, right? They got really
Yeah.
strong thumbs and can text faster than I can read, but they necessarily don't practice the social skills. What other differences that you're seeing and why they might not?
I think a lot of households have 2 parents working,
So kids don't have as much contact with their parents, and they don't have as much guidance.
Right, or it's different, right? I know for a lot of the families that I work with, if there are two parents, they are both working, they're working 12-hour days, there's aftercare, so they're going from structured activity to structured activity to structured activity. That's one scenario, or it's a single family, right? So there's not as much of the interaction, there's not as much of the modeling, and they're going from adult-led activity to adult-led activity to adult-led activity, and what do you miss out on when you're doing that all the time? And this isn't a criticism, it's just the reality of where we live, or what's going on. What's the outcome of that?
You don't learn how to navigate social relationships?
You don't know how to navigate, and then social relationships or life, right? You don't get the practice that you might have once gotten. Any other changes or differences? Reasons why this might be true.
Like going along with that, they don't have that free time anymore, so they don't know what to do with themselves.
What do you learn in free time?
How to be bored, to be creative. It's the
You know
best.
how to be
It's just
bored.
the best, yeah.
Right?
It's
And then
true.
you bring,
We
okay,
have
so
boring days at home with kids. Like, we're not doing anything. Be bored, figure
Be
it out.
bored, right.
Then they get creative. They build forts and
so it's that creativity, but they're
Yeah.
also doing problem solving, right?
Right.
They're learning problem solving. They're learning, they're learning coping skills. I get hired by school districts to come and run groups for kids on how to cope. And these are your typically developing kids. These are kids that are just having because what does play do? Give you those skills for coping, right? So because of the way things have been going and times are changing, and times are always changing, we need to get more concrete in delivering these skills for our kids to be successful. These are skills for life success. I'm not saying academics isn't important, and I'm not saying intelligence and college and all this stuff. But even just think about, that's my boss actually, Stephanie. Just think about all the stuff that's going on right now in our move, right? I don't know how many we're moving, and they're doing all sorts. All the anxiety and the tension and the stress. If we don't have the skills to cope with that, are we going to be successful? No. And a lot of people don't necessarily have those skills. We all slip, right? But then we have the social skills to help each other up and support each other. But that's exactly what I'm talking about, and those are exactly the skills that we're seeing. And what the challenge is we're seeing our kids decreasing in these skills. So then you add, these are them. So what skills are needed for success in life? The ability to manage emotions and behaviors to achieve one's goal. This is something that I am still struggling with as a 40-something-year-old woman, right? Managing your emotions to achieve your goals. This is not easy stuff, but this is stuff we need practice, practice, practice. Recognizing one's emotions, values, strengths, and limitations. Having the self-awareness. Make ethical, constructive choices about personal and pro-social behavior, and form positive relationships, and show understanding and empathy for others. These are skills, and these are skills that can be taught. The good news is you can learn them at any point in time. You can learn them. It's much easier to learn them when you're a little kid, but you can learn them. These aren't fixed. And no matter what your developmental capabilities are, you can learn them in varying degrees. You absolutely can learn them. So the 3 essentials of social emotional learning. Caring relationships are the foundation for all lasting learning. Emotions affect how and what we learn. Goal setting and problem solving provide focus, and we're preparing our youth for an uncertain future. But one constant will be of importance, and that's the interpersonal relationship. I was doing a workshop the other day, and I showed this little video clip that talked about people who are starting a technical, like a computer-based technical education. What they learn their junior year in their sophomore year in college is obsolete by their senior year. That the knowledge they're learning will be obsolete by a certain point. So they darn well better have some of these problem skills and these coping skills and know how to find information with relevance, because those are the things that are going to sustain. So knowledge is important, but these social skills are also. So what is emotional intelligence? Does anybody know? It's social emotional learning, right? Social emotional learning is the academic term for emotional intelligence. It's the skills associated with emotional intelligence. And then 1995, Dan Goleman wrote a book, Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. And basically what he discovered in his research is if you have these skills, it's a greater predictor of life success than just academics or test scores. That possessing these skills, it gives you a much better chance at being successful in life. So let me just go here. So I'm talking a lot about, and you know, it's like I'm preaching to the choir. I know that much of this information isn't new to you, but this is the evidence-based pedagogy. This is, if we're going to be doing this stuff, if we're going to be teaching our kids or teaching our adults or teaching our spouses or teaching our significant others, many of these skills, this is sort of the key, the key to making it successful, what the research shows us works. The first thing is we want to teach it before they need it. Teach it preventatively. Have you ever tried to teach somebody how to calm down when they've lost it? Right? Does it work?
No.
No. Don't do it to me. If I've lost it, don't tell me to calm down because it's all over with, right? So we want to teach it before they need it. Or how many of you learned how to drive a car in the Garden State Parkway? You laugh, but I always get somebody that raises their hand, right? Where do you learn to drive a car?
Parking lot.
A parking lot, right? A safe space, a space that's contained and, you know, you can't do too much damage. I think some of you know my father took me to a cemetery.
Oh.
Right? Can't really hurt anybody there, right? You know? Had a lot of faith in me. Had an autocratic system growing up. Anyway, I'll let that go. Teach the skill before they need it. Or if we're trying to teach respect, or if we're trying to teach somebody how to manage their emotion, we teach it before they need it, not in the heat of the moment, right? Because we also know the brain isn't necessarily accessing that information. Anyway, focusing on the skill. I had a teacher once say to me that one of the most important things, I worked with her for 4 years, but one of the most important things she ever learned from me was this idea that not all our kids have skills to do the things we're asking them to do, and we're asking them to do this stuff over and over again, and they're not successful, and then we get angry with them for not being successful, and they either get frustrated with themselves, and then finally they just say, right? So let's make sure we focus on the skill. What skill? So for example, emotional regulation. What skill do you use to calm yourself down? What do you do? Anybody will know?
I breathe.
You breathe. That's a good thing, right? Don't hold your breath. That's a good thing. Anybody do anything different? Depending on the level of anxiety I'm feeling, sometimes I have a theme song that plays in my head. Want to know what my theme song is? We Are the Champions. So you see my hair kind of fly back. And I've done that. So what is your skill? And I have a conversation when I'm working with either an adult or a child. What's your skill? What do you use for whatever particular thing I'm trying to accomplish? And maybe it's not working and we need to fix it, but at least I know what our baseline is. Then we need to infuse first of all, we need to develop a common language and infuse it into our climate and culture. How we do things here. How we do things here. Because what we want is for them to overlearn. And that's where this idea of knowledge versus skill comes in. How many times has something happened where a child or even an adult blew up and you said to them, what could you have done differently? And they can answer you, right? Can they answer you? Sometimes, right? What could you have done differently? I could have done it. And you say to them, well, why didn't you? And what's the answer? I don't know. I forgot. I wasn't thinking of it. And they are absolutely being truthful. They do not know. They did forget, and because they have not overlearned the skill. That's really the goal, to have access to the skill under stress. I am practicing this every day of my life because while emotional regulation, I'm Irish and Italian, it's not something that comes easy for me. It's something that I have to work on. If you notice, I have to hold the ball because I talk a lot with my hand. And I've gotten better with it over the years. But there's one area of my life that I still have a hard time with. Anyone guess where it is? Has to do with driving in New Jersey. I'm not originally from here. So I get road rage. Now I get road anger, right? So we're coming down. It's no longer rage, it's road anger. I'm hoping to get road annoyed, right? That's where I'm hoping to get to. But it's this idea that I've started to have self-awareness, and actually Ken Verney, anybody do the mindfulness, right, has gotten me to, have the self-talk. What are you telling yourself about the person who cut you off, well, anyway. So, but it's that idea to having access to the skill under stress, and that takes a lot of practice. It means, somebody says muscle memory, habit. So you have to practice it over and over and over and over and over again, so that eventually I get to the point where somebody cuts me off, and rather than the finger coming up, and it took a lot of practice, and it still takes a lot of practice, and it's true with our kids, with our people that we're working with. They need the skill. They need to be taught it preventatively. We want to have a prompting cue for them, a common language that we're all using and practicing. We want to practice for it, but we absolutely want them to practice, role play, practice, try it, it doesn't work, reflect, try it again, and understanding that idea, that knowledge versus skill. Many of your kids, the idea of respect, many of your kids can tell you what that means, but in the heat of the moment can't actually do it. So helping them to develop strategies for overlearning. So we are a skill-based program. Social emotional learning really is about recognizing core social competencies. And these are predictive across prevention-focused areas: drug and alcohol, bullying, violence, etc., juvenile justice. These skills are predictive of later outcomes. We are skill-building versus knowledge-based. Building skills, prompts and cue for universal language, and prompts, and when that promotes the internal generalization of the skills. So what does the research say? And this is just really, there was a meta-analysis done that looked at what are the effects of doing sustained social emotional learning with students, of all varying backgrounds and levels. And basically what they found is if we do it with some fidelity, social emotional skills increase, attitudes about self and others increases, classroom behavior increases, and academics increase. Right? And what I love is the idea that conduct problems decrease, aggressive behavior decreases, and emotional distress decreases. So the research backs us up. One of the things that I'm advocating for, and I know somebody said they liked collaborators. Who's my collaborator? Collaborator, yay. One of the things that I advocate for is none of this is rocket science, right? Social emotional isn't rocket science. I think it's something that we all kind of know, and what was done, like anything else, somebody wrote a manual and did the research and everything. But this isn't new ideas. But one of the things that I'm always advocating for is this idea that we do need to work together. Many of our schools, many of our environments look like this top house, where there's so many great programs going on, right? There's so many great programs, research-based programs, and you're not necessarily seeing the outcomes. And you're like, but we've got great people doing great work, and why aren't we seeing the outcomes? And one of the reasons is we're not coordinated in our efforts, and there's a lot of overlaps in what we do. And if we could coordinate our efforts, for example, just off the top of my head, how many of you are sort of implementing the nurtured heart? Right? So could you see the connection between social emotional learning and the nurtured heart? So why can't we put them together and build it up to make it stronger and to sustain it? Drug and alcohol prevention, sex education, substance abuse prevention, mental. So there's a connection, and as often as we can put the pieces together, it really has a huge impact for our kids, for our clients and our kids or our consumers. Forgive me if I don't know the mental health language, and correct me please. Because it really is about all of us working together to help our youth, help our adults gain these life skills so that they can be successful, so that they don't need us anymore. Right? That's really what we're trying to do. I'll give you a very simple idea about what happens. So I was working in Highland Park, which is you guys know Highland Park. It's an interesting place. Very, very diverse. And I was working with a young boy who had trouble with emotional regulation. We were trying a bunch of different strategies in the classroom, and then that playground time that unstructured time is where a lot of the problems came in. So we developed some strategies for him to try to use out on the playground. And he was doing really well. Deshaun was not getting into the fights he was getting into. He was struggling, but he was moving forward. He was 30% of the time doing really, really well, and we were moving that number up. Well, one day Deshaun got into a huge fight. We're like, what happened? You know, you were doing so well. And he goes, well, the dare officer taught me to count 10. And I didn't know if I was supposed to count 10 or keep calm, so I just punched her. Now, the point of that is you're learning the same thing over and over again, but it's getting called a bunch of different things, and it gets confusing. And so it's this idea of trying to put the pieces together versus, like, so for me, just off the top of my head, with the nurtured heart, I'm thinking the reset. The reset is about self-awareness, but it's also about the ability to manage your emotion, but it's also about the ability to then communicate, right? Or in giving they don't call it compliments, what do they call it? Recognition. You as the practitioner need to have the self-awareness, right? And then you need the authenticity to be able to give the recognition with some kind of validity. Because we all know kids can see right through you if you're BSing them, right? So it's this idea that we all need to work together if we want to see the impact in everything that we do. So what is social decision making? It's where I've dedicated the last 20-something years of my life. And I'm proud of it, actually. So it's an evidence-based model for delivering social-emotional learning. It's a skill-based approach. It uses concrete components, skill building versus knowledge-based pedagogy, prompts and cues, and promotes the internalization. When we work with social decision making, there's a whole bunch of components, but we talk about readiness skills that for problem solving, we talk about problem solving skills, but the big piece is the application. If we don't help apply the skills for our students or our kids or our youth or our adults, they're never going to go anywhere. And we've received a bunch of awards from all over the place. So I was going to teach you one of the skills. We have a variety of them, but one of the skills, that's one of my favorite ones. It's called Be Your Best. And Be Your Best stands for body posture, eye contact, say something appropriate, and tone of voice, right? It's Be Your Best. And we talk about with Be Your Best, assertive, aggressive, and passive behaviors. So I have it up there. Yeah. Assertive, aggressive, or passive behaviors. And we talk about how each of these things plays out. And a lot of times when I'm working with youth, and it seems we spend a good amount of time talking about what respect means. What does it mean? How does it feel to get respect? And if you can't articulate that, how does it feel to be disrespected? Right? And that triggers some feelings. So how does it feel to be respected? So I think that we can agree when we work together, I'm going to give you respect, you're going to give me respect. Can we agree to that? And this is what it means. This is what it looks like. So what does aggressive body posture look like? And I have the youth do the role play, right? What does it look like? It could be anything from fist clenched, and we're very concrete so that they can really articulate and break it down. What does aggressive body posture look like? Now, what does passive body posture look like? Right? Slouched. Any of you work with teenagers? You see this, right? I mean, their butts are like off the chair, their necks are, whatever it is. And then what does assertive body posture look like? You're standing, neutral. And we play with that, how it feels in different events. What is aggressive eye contact? Now, before we go any further, in each and every one of these things, there's cultural components. There are cultural components to each and every one of these things, depending on who we're communicating with. Like for some cultures, adult and youth, eye contact is a big one. So we have the conversation about what are those cultural components. What's aggressive eye contact?
Glaring.
I mean, it's glaring. Any mothers in the room, right? I had one that mastered this, right? Who, like, the hairs on my arm I could feel her looking at me, even if my back was turned. Right? Aggressive eye contact. What's assertive eye contact? And again, cultural components are absolutely are, but let's have the conversation. What does it look like? For me, it's looking at you. Eyes are kind of soft. You don't see my wrinkles. But I'm also blinking every once in a while, because this is pretty assertive, I think. Right? So, we play with it a little bit. And then what's passive eye contact?
looking down.
None, right? Or darting. Again, cultural, and there might be some other issues, but this is the perception. Oh, this is usually their favorite one. What's aggressive speech? Say it again?
Yelling.
Yeah, well, the tone is loud, right?
Cursing.
But so the cursing, right? Any other aggressive? Any family therapy? Yeah. You are always late. You are never in time. You. That you is very aggressive. Assertive, passive speech. Oh, come on, you teenagers know this one.
I don't know.
I don't. IDK.
Okay.
What's the whatever? Wasn't there whatever? Do they do that? I don't know. Right? So but there's passive. Whatever. Okay. Sorry. Right? So there's these words they use. And then assertive. What are some assertive words?
I statements. I statements.
I statements, right? Or we'll play with this a little because I was working in an alternate school in Irvington. And the truth was they weren't going to be using I statements out on the street. So what could be assertive or what's considered assertive? And that opens up another conversation to what's considered assertive in different areas of life and how do we know how to manage that. So assertive I statements, I always say please and thank you are assertive, being polite. Aggressive tone, loud. Assertive tone, neutral, loud enough to be heard. Passive tone, mumbling. You never pick me. Whiny, right? Which is a trigger for me, but anyway. So each of these things affects your message. It affects how people respond to you. It affects how people perceive you. When we think about effective communication or respect, I think about this middle row here. This is what we're striving for. That's what both of us are striving for. But we might, I'm the queen of passive aggressive. I admit it. I'm working on it, but I admit it. So let's see how this works. So say how old are you? You're 12. And we're in class together. And you have my pencil and I want it back. Give me my pencil back! Okay, so first of all, passive aggressive or assertive? Aggressive. What about my body was aggressive?
Lunge.
The lunge, right? My eyes.
Face.
I tried to do it really exaggerated, right? What words did I use? Give me. And my tone? Loud, screechy. What's your response to me? If you were 12, not as a refined man, but as a 12-year-old boy.
I don't know. What would a 12-year-old do?
They wouldn't give it back.
Right. Probably not. You were
Maybe
probably
do one of
not.
these?
Well, because I'm a girl, you might be a different, you might have responded differently. If I was a 12-year-old boy doing that to another 12-year-old boy, it tends to get like this, right? But generally, when you're aggressive to somebody, what usually happens? They're aggressive back. If you bounce a ball really hard on the ground, it bounces up and hits you in the face, right? Aggression tends to breed aggression. All right, so let's try it a different way. What's your last name?
Revere.
Revere? Miss Revere, he won't give me my pencil back. Passive, aggressive, or assertive? Passive. How could you tell? What about my body? What did I do? I'm the victim, right? Where were my eyes? God knows where, but not here, right? What words? He won't give me. And my tone was very whiny. Now, I know you're the consummate professional, but say you had to tell me what you were thinking. What was it that you were thinking? Shut up. Sit down. I wouldn't give it to you either. Right? So when you're passive, what happens? People tend to roll right over you, right? When you're passive, people tend to roll right over you. So we're going to strive for assertive, and we're going to see how that works, right? Could I have my pencil back, please?
Sure.
See, it's that simple. So what about it was assertive? I stood neutral, right? I looked you. Could I have my pencil back, please? And I used you heard me. It was firm, but it wasn't loud, so we modulated it. Now, it's not always that easy, right? Especially peer-to-peer. I have short-term memory problems. Revere? Okay. Mr. Revere, could you help me get my pencil back, please?
Yes.
And it's automatic. You didn't even have to think about it, right? So assertiveness, if you're assertive, you tend to get an assertive response back. Now, here's the challenge. You don't always get it, what you want. And this is what's hard for adults to realize, and it's hard for children to realize. Just because you're assertive does not mean you get what you want. But what does it do?
Paves the way for future relationships.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely, right? Increases your likelihood of being successful, more so than another way. Does not escalate the conflict. If you're in school and I'm screaming at you to get my pencil, who knows what's going to happen? Or if I'm whining to you, who knows what's going to happen, right? So you're not going to escalate the conflict, and you're not going to make things worse. You have the ability to then do some problem solving, as opposed to making things go off the grid. We play with this a lot because there's a lot about this. It's not cut and dry. It's not so cut and dry. And I usually tell my kids, actually not my kids, I usually tell the adults I work with a story about my quick check experience with this particular skill. So I'm a coffee addict, and I admit it. Okay, I'm a coffee addict, I admit it. I usually have my coffee at home, but every once in a while I have to go to quick check because I just didn't get enough. Right? It's like a fix that needs to constantly be fed. And you guys know the quick check over here. Somehow in the morning it can get a little crazy. So this happened last summer. So I'm in quick check, and there's a big long line, and you're rushing to the office because you don't want to be late. And there's a person in front of me. It's me. So I'm almost about to coffee nirvana. I'm almost up to that front desk where I can just like get out of here and start my day. And this lady walks in, and she was obviously, there was something not exactly right. It was 80 degrees outside. She had 1,000 layers on. She was disheveled. You could just tell that it wasn't, she had some challenges, right? She cut in front of the line. Okay. What should I have done to be assertive or passive or aggressive? Should I have been passive, aggressive, or assertive? What would you have done?
Nothing.
And that's exactly what I did. I did nothing. I let her go. Now, was I being passive, aggressive, or assertive, and why?
Assertive is like about assessing the situation.
And I have this conversation with my kids because nobody wants to be perceived as weak, right? Nobody that we know wants to be perceived as weak, and especially the teenagers that I work with, they do not want to be perceived as weak. So we have this conversation. Was I weak by letting that person get in front of me? I don't think so. I didn't think so. Because why? Because I had the self-awareness to understand and the social awareness, and I made a conscious choice that my best course of action was to let her go first. The gentleman in front of me had a different response. He was what I perceived as aggressive. And it became a problem. And none of us got our coffee anytime soon. The other issue that I find, depending on the group that I'm working with this, is when I have my groups, I have them do role plays. There is a difference between how aggressive and assertiveness is perceived based on race and based on gender and based on culture. And having that conversation is important, right? I'll have two women doing a situation, and the men in the room will perceive it as aggressive. And the women in the room perceive it as assertive. No one's right, no one's necessarily wrong, but having that awareness of how our perceptions color what we see and how we interact. Any questions about best? So the prompt and cue is, were you your best? And when we talk about respectful communication, we talk about assertiveness. The next skill that I'm going to get over with you is one of the most important skills that we'll ever learn, problem solving. That's funny. Maybe it's... I know, right?
It's usually a
Wrong number.
like an automated.
Oh, all right,
This
good.
is a landline.
It's not like
It's not like someone with.
evacuate the building.
I hope not.
How do you learn problem solving? This is actually the foundation skill for social emotional learning, actually. But how do you learn problem solving? Practice, right? Trial and error. And what's different today? Do our kids get that opportunity as often? No. Dr. Maurice Elias created this program, actually in 1979, but he created the program. And one of the things that he talks about now, he's a professor of psychology at Rutgers, is he talks about we're spending all this time preparing our kids to get into college, but we're not necessarily giving them the skills to be successful out of college, to get the job, to be successful, to figure out what to do. And that's where some problem solving comes in. So there are a bunch of skills. Problem solving is a skill that can be learned, and the key to teaching problem solving is to facilitate, going step by step, facilitate rather than tell. So here are the questions. So here's the 8-step framework. And here are the questions that we asked in terms of trying to get to somebody to come through a solution. So let me go through this just really quickly. I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to ask you these questions and see if you can come up with a solution, okay? Barbara, our secretary, wanted a house, saved and saved and saved, finally had enough money, bought the house, moved in. Everything worked like clockwork. Movers came right on time, moved in. She took a couple days off to work. You know that tired, exhausted feeling? Like, job well done. She's moved into the house. She's in her new bedroom with the new picture window, and she's so excited, and she's laying there in bed, feeling so good, about to close her eyes, and the dog starts barking. This dog from she doesn't know where. She gets no sleep. Gets up the next morning, says, all right, I'm going to try this again. I'm going to clean up my house. So she cleans the house up all day long, work all day long, gets in bed. Now she's really exhausted because it's the next night. She's lying in bed, and guess what? The dog's barking again. Another night of no sleep. She wakes up the next morning and realizes that she really has a problem and there's something she's got to do. So how's Barbara feeling? Tired, frustrated, annoyed, exhausted. What's the problem?
Can't sleep.
Dog barking, can't sleep. What's her goal?
Sleep.
So how can she do that? What are some possible solutions?
Earplugs.
Earplugs. Okay? No one's going to say shoot the dog? Because this is a brainstorm, right? And in the brainstorm, anything goes. So earplugs,
Talk to the neighbor.
talk to the neighbor,
Yell at the neighbor.
yell at the neighbor,
Yell at the dog.
white noise. All right, those are some good solutions. Now we're going to think about the consequences for those solutions. What's the consequence? Now here's the thing about consequences. Consequences aren't positive or negative, they're just outcomes, right? So what's the positive consequence to earplugs? Positive consequence.
You might get some sleep.
You might get some sleep. The negative?
You have to wear earplugs.
You have to wear earplugs, they hurt. Positive consequence to white noise? It may help. Negative?
You have to listen to it.
You have to listen to it, right? Positive consequence to shooting the dog?
No more barking.
No more barking. Negative?
She can get in trouble.
It's wrong, get in trouble. Right? And the positive to talking to the neighbor?
It could go well.
It could go well. The negative?
It could go bad.
They could get another dog. Right? So out of all those solutions, what is it we're going to pick?
Maybe both.
Talk to the neighbor, right? Usually that's what we come up with. And now we're going to plan it. Using being your best, being respectful, we're actually going to role play what we're going to say. We're going to try it and we're going to rethink it. We're going to do the role play. We're going to practice what we're going to say. We're going to go to the neighbor. We're going to try it. And then we're going to evaluate how did it work and did we learn it. This is a step-by-step framework for teaching problem solving. Going step by step, guiding, facilitating their thinking. I was running a girls group, and I was doing this activity with the girls around the idea of, it's a true story from my childhood, or my adolescence. My best friend Pam, growing up, we had a sleepover planned, and it was 2 days before the sleepover, and she got invited to go to the movies from this guy she really liked on the same night of the sleepover. So I stop it there, and we do problem solving from both Pam's perspective and my perspective about what she should do, and we come up with some different strategies. What do you think Pam did?
Went with the boy.
She went with the boy. We didn't talk for 6 months. It was a big deal, but getting that to start getting relevant problems that are hypothetical that they work through, and having those conversations and learning some problem solving strategies was really powerful for them. Another piece of that is understanding point of view. if you do problem solving from each person's perspective and then switch roles, you can at least get the idea. I've done this with parents and children where curfew is the issue, and each of the person does the problem solving from the other person's perspective, and then they talk about it and communicate. And it does develop some empathy and perspective taking, and also teaches problem solving. Any questions about, I'm whipping through this, but it's just this idea of teaching the concrete skill. I just wanted to introduce Common Strong is our newest sort of addition to the social decision-making program. It's an 8-module computer-based software, interactive software that's used for, I would say, 13 and above, ages 13, maybe 12 and above. And it focuses on the skill of emotional regulation and effective communication. It's in collaboration with Ripple Effects, which is an evidence-based, computer-based software. And it's really, it's a really an interesting, is anybody familiar with Ripple Effects? Okay, so Ripple Effects is a larger program. This is just about 8 to 10 modules. And Common Strong is learner-directed, evidence-based software application to promote 2 key skill sets crucial to overall social emotional competence and good decision. The ability to calm oneself at will and make concise decisions, and the ability to relate to others with assertiveness, avoiding both, it should say, passive and aggressive behavior. So it's software. What I like about the software is it's really user-friendly, and it speaks the language of 12 and 13 and 14-year-olds. And it opens the door for you to come in and have these conversations later on, but they interface with the computer. For how I usually work with it is they interface with the computer first, and then we have conversations or strategies around it afterwards. I have this available to do some beta testing. Is anybody on the inpatient child adolescent unit?
We're partial.
You're partial? Okay, so the inpatient unit is going to be using this. If you have interest in this, you can use it for free. The only thing is I would need to collect some sort of data, but it wouldn't be like IRB data. It would just might even be user data. So if you have an interest in this and you think this would be helpful, let me know. And
How many weeks did you say it is?
Say again?
Did you say it's like a certain amount of weeks or sessions, or is it just like a
8 weeks.
8 weeks?
It could be, it's 8 modules. So you could even just, we could be flexible. You could even make it be, I would connect it with something else that you're doing. So you could do 3 modules. Each module is about 10, 15 minutes. So you could do it, yeah. And you could do it in terms of a group setting, or you could do it in an individual setting.
Yeah.
So my contact information is in the front. If you have an interest in it, just let me know. And because we're trying to do some, it's hot off the press.
You said 12 to 4. I'm sorry, 12 to 14.
12 to probably a little bit older.
Okay.
Yeah, it's and actually, it's local people's children is in the modules.
Okay.
Karen's son is in it. So everybody. So it's really great. And if you want to just look at it before you decide if you want to use it, I can even just email it to you. No, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. And that's really it. Don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. There's a lot, I know, going on day to day, and there's a lot that we can't do to get through the day. But it really is about thinking about what we can do. I always tell my teachers, less is more, right? Less is more. If we're focusing on just 1 or 2 things with the common language and developing it with some kind of fidelity, we're going to see greater outcomes than flooding them with all sorts of information that they're not necessarily getting. Well, thank you guys very much. If you have, again, any questions, or if I can help facilitate any of that, let me know. It's erin.bruno@rutgers.edu.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.